up in my hands, down in my feet. I have the joy, 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 joy all over me. That's how the song goes, right? And what's the next part? Let me see how young y'all are. You remember the last line? We'll get it. We'll get it when we start singing. We start, I have no voice from my incident this morning. Not that one. But joy, joy down there. Okay, good. That's the key. That's the key we're starting on. But you have to kind of help us out today. We need some hand clapping. I need to know that you're really happy about the message that's about to come. Yes, you folk who are in the back. Remember MV? You couldn't you couldn't sit in the back. Come closer to the front. Come a little closer. There was a commercial back in the day that used to say, get a little closer with Crest. Okay. All right, thank you so much. I have the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Down in my heart. You sound good. I have the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Down in my heart. One more time, I have the joy. Joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Where? I have the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Down in my heart. I have the peace that passeth. I have the peace that passeth understanding. Where? I have the peace that passeth understanding down in my heart. Let's make it our own. I have the seventh day Adventist message. Come on, where? I have the seventh day Adventist message down in my heart. Now this is your part. I am so happy, so very happy. I have the love of Jesus in my heart. I am so happy. I have the love of Jesus in my. I have the joy. I have the joy, 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 joy. Where? I have the joy, 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 joy down in my where? You did good. You want one more? Let's sing a hymn. Let's see if I can pull out my hymn book. You know, they have these folds. Come we that love marching to Zion. Listen to this. It is hymn number 422. Everybody, let's sing. Come we that love the Lord, and let our joys be known. Join in a song with sweet accord. Join in a song with sweet accord, and thus surround. We're marching to Zion. Beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching up that beautiful city. Before we sing the second verse, I need to hear some harmony. We know harmony. I need some sopranos. Who sings a good soprano? I need an alto. Somebody just pointed you out. I need a good alto. All right, someone pointed you out too. I need, so those of you who didn't raise your hands, you must be my tenors and basses. All right, so we're gonna, when we get to the chorus, we're going to add the harmonies, and we're gonna make this a song of our determination to make it to Zion. Amen. Let's go. Let those refuse. Let those refuse to sing who never knew our God, but children of the heavenly King, but children of may speak their joys abroad, may speak. We're marching to Zion, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to that beautiful city of, last verse, the hill, let our songs abound, and every tear be dried. We're marching through Emmanuel's ground. We're marching through Emmanuel's ground to fair worlds on high. To you better know the words when he sings. We are marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to that beauty. One more time. Oh, we are marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to that beautiful city of God. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Tim. You're one of a kind. I love you, and you still owe us in North Brooklyn the joy that I was looking forward to you leading out the praise team. That's another story. That's another story. The young lady that is about to introduce our speaker is a twin, an identical twin. She has one of my names that my daddy gave me, but daddy called me Deborah, but her mom and dad called her Debbie. She is the assistant to the president of the Potomac Conference and communication director of that place. And she's going to tell you about this young man she met when he was 15. Don't give the whole story, Deb. And she was 14. So they did meet within a week and fell madly in love. They have grown up together, and they have loved for a long, long time. How many of you were blessed today as you listened to the message? I have loved her husband and admired him for a long, long time. And I am so happy that both of them are here today. Amen. So Deb, would you come and stand? And look at Pastor Anderson just looking at her, said, that's my girl. Isn't she gorgeous? That body language speaks. And he's clapping. Let's join him in that. You know, I love to see couples in love. And I love when the expressions are seen and they are heard. And we are so happy that you are here. Would you introduce this man that some only heard of him this morning, and we hope he'll be coming back again to Hanson Place.
Thank you for the opportunity, Pastor Patricia. It is my honor to tell you just a little bit more about this man that I call my husband, and my children call their dad, and our grandchildren call their chaps. So he's their chaps, short, affectionate for chaplain, and I am their Chi-Chi. I am not grandma or granny. That doesn't work. However, let me tell you about him. I did meet the chaplain when he was 15. I was 14. I was late to church, and my twin sister and I jumped out of the car. He was kind of smitten, but he didn't know with whom he was smitten. It took him a little bit, but he finally got it right. He got the right one. He is a product of Christian education. He is a nomad. His father was one of the first of 3 African-American hospital administrators for the Veterans Administration. And so like pastors, he grew up moving every 3 years. Pittsburgh happened to be one of those stops along the way. So he was born to Charles and Thelma Anderson, went to Pine Forge Academy. We made it through boarding school together. And then he went to Oakwood, at which time he knew God was calling him, but he didn't really want to listen. You ever been there? And so he left and went to the Navy, enlisted for 6 years, and listened finally to God's calling and prompting. He left, went back, graduated from Columbia Union College, now Washington Adventist University, pastored for 14 years before we went back to the Navy. When they called him, it was a miracle of God, and he always wanted to be a Navy chaplain. So it worked out well, and we went back in 96.
And you could have put it, Debbie, and he has been a good one.
He has been a good one. Excellent chaplain, excellent pastor, and excellent husband. He has earned in all of those, since we've been married, he has earned his undergrad, his Master of Divinity. He earned a Master in Counseling and a Master of Sacred Theology from Boston University, all while we were married. I keep asking him, and then he earned his Doctorate of Divinity. I keep asking him if he'll sell me just one of those masters, but he won't do that. Anyway, let me just tell you that I told him years ago that on his tombstone, the word integrity was going to be there. He's not perfect, but he's a man of integrity. And if you want somebody to pray for you, I am a witness. If you want somebody to pray for you, call him. God hears him, God answers him. And everyone that he prays for is the benefit of that. He is now semi-retired. He spent 7 years at the North American Division as the director of Adventist Chaplaincy Ministries, the first director for the North American Division. 2 years ago, he stepped away from that job and has been enjoying life and finding what God's new purpose is for him. It has been a wonderful 42 years that we have been married now. We have 2 children, Jared and DeAndrea. Jared, you will, if I can just brag a little bit, mommy writes, if you ever watch Meet the Press, when they roll the credits at the end of the show, Jared Anderson is on there. He works there every Sunday morning for Meet the Press. Our daughter is followed in her father's footsteps, was a Navy psychologist. She is now in private practice. She and her husband live in Michigan, where you will be going soon, where her husband is one of the treasurers for the Lake Union. So I give you my husband. Well, no, you can listen to him, but I'm never giving him away. As he presents, he is my heart. Is my heart. If you ever want to meet somebody that you can trust, love and respect, God does all of that for him, and he does that for me. So I present to you my husband, Chaplain Paul Anderson. The pastor told me I had to do this. It's a Sabbath kiss.
I could not have done that. The wife could. That's beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you, Sister Anderson, for that introduction. I do appreciate the fact that you didn't tell them all the whole truth. I have crooked fingers, and when I get to heaven, they will be straightened out. And the rest of my foibles will be also. 42 years, I said to her, probably when we were 16, talking on the phone, I said, "You stick with me, I'll show you the world." And we've been to Europe, we've been to Asia. She's still on top of Mount Fuji. We've been in the towers in Seoul, Korea, San Francisco, New York, Bahrain. Where else have we been? A lot of places. She's been to Hawaii more times than I've been, but she's good. So I have a presentation for you guys that is extremely timely and exceptionally important. I don't know how many of you noted in the news last week that the U.S. Army immediately moved 800 non-commissioned officers to Fort Knox, Kentucky, to be trained immediately as recruiters. Why do you think that might be? We just got out of a 21-year war. 21-year war. And the country is tired, the economy is tired, but the world is still raging. And all of our military services are undermanned. The Army, can you turn me up a little bit so I don't have to shout? The Army did not meet their enlistment goals for the past 4 years, nor the Air Force. The Air Force just this week raised their age when people can come into the Air Force from 39 to 42. In the reserves, you can get into most services up until the age of 40. It has been raised to 47. But I want to first share this thought. The title of this presentation, Adventists in the Military, Is It a Sin to Serve? Is it a sin to serve in the military? There was a time in the development of the Seventh-day Adventist Church when it was taught, and this was in the 1800s actually, in the Civil War, that it was a sin to serve. Because in that war, men were fighting their brothers, people that they knew, and all of that. And the Adventist Church in that era actually developed a fund to help people buy themselves out of conscription for $250. We don't have that fund anymore. But we don't have a draft either right now. Well, I'll correct that statement in a few minutes. But the latest statement of the Seventh-day Adventist Church with regard to serving in the military is, I wonder if my battery's dead. Can you advance to the next slide, please? So, the official position of the church says this. We accept as our basic view of the 1954 General Conference Session Action entitled The Relationship of Seventh-day Adventists to Civil Government and War, as amended at the 1954 Autumn Council and further amended as follows. Genuine Christianity manifests itself in good citizenship and loyalty to civil government. That has not changed. The orientation of Adventism was that, if you serve, we are pro-lifers. Adventists are pro-lifers. We believe in the sanctity of life from cradle to grave, which is a different perspective than the other side of that argument, but cradle to grave. So saving life and helping life is a priority for Seventh-day Adventists. Those who are born deserve to live with dignity, with enough food, with security, with grace. And I extend that even further, but I find myself out on a limb that if you believe all that for the infant, then what about the teenager, the gangbanger, the drug dealer, the murderer, capital punishment, etc.? We believe that it is important for Seventh-day Adventists to work to support life-giving ventures. So as it relates to the military, our history has always been that Adventists are encouraged to be non-combatant. Non-combatant. What does that mean? It really means that you are opposed to bearing arms. So the average Adventist back in the older days didn't train with weapons and that kind of thing. And there was a period when people who volunteered to go into the military would fall under church discipline. 1954, the Adventist Church and General Conference session said, don't do that anymore. If you have a person who volunteers to go into the military, you, as a congregation, do not have the right to disfellowship said person. And, you know, curiously enough, Desmond Doss was the only one that we know of, Adventist, who has won a Congressional Medal of Honor. He enlisted before 1954. But his church did not disfellowship him. And when he had that act of valor, his church sent him all over the world as a hero. As a hero. But he didn't kill people. God empowered this man who was only about this tall. I actually met him when I was 13 or 14 years old, and I was taller than he was then. Wasn't that big a man. But we stood on the cliff where he lowered 70-plus people down over a cliff, including enemy soldiers. He cared for wounded enemy soldiers as well as wounded American soldiers. That is the valor of people who serve as non-combatants, who will tend to, or try to save life and enhance life as we go. So that's the rubric. Now, point of full disclosure. I grew up in an Adventist home. We were so Adventist that our parents wouldn't buy us cap pistols. So when we played cowboys and Indians in the neighborhood, the Anderson boys always had to be the Indians. But we were fierce Indians. And we didn't lose. So we changed American history in our neighborhood for sure, or at least that part that they tell. But when I was at Oakwood, my wife said I didn't listen to God and my call to ministry. I actually did. I was at Oakwood and I hit a vocational crisis. What am I going to do with my life? At the same time that I hit an existential crisis. What does God want me to do with my life? And I knew He called me to ministry. But strangely, God drove me away from Oakwood College, where I was a freshman on the dean's list, away from there to prepare me for ministry. An uncommon thing, but I know now looking back, if I had stayed at Oakwood on that 4-year trajectory to pastoral ministry, I wouldn't have been ready for what I would face. But God introduced me to my destiny while I was in the Navy. But the draft went out in '73.
and became an all-volunteer military. And because it was an all-volunteer military, you could not voluntarily enlist as a conscientious objector. I took that chance. And I'd never fired a gun at anything in my life. But when they taught me how, it was like, woo, woo. I could hit a can or another target downrange and farther downrange, and I had some felicity with that, and it was fun. And I became a point person, then subsequently an automatic rifleman and a platoon leader in my squad. Fortunately, we didn't go to war during that time. God spared me that. So in this, what I'm trying to say is that as the world churns, people will make decisions. They should make informed decisions based upon their character, their spiritual training, and fortitude, and go forward to make the best life that they can. Could you go to the next slide, please? And in doing so, now I think if you click that, this video should show. If it works, I want to show you, this is a 12-minute video that I funded and was the executive producer on. If not, if you hit the link up there, it should start in another frame. Here we go. There must be another screen that it's playing in. Although it should have played there. I tell you what, let me press on for the sake of time. Take me to the next slide, please. But if you all look at that, HTTPS, Vimeo, whatever that was, you can look at that video. It won 4 awards. And it was about a young man who was wrestling with military service and all of that. Here's the thing that is real important right now. As the world boils, most of us think that the military draft was done away with. It was not. It was stopped. But it was not moved out of law. So if you know any boys, any young men between the age of 17 and 40, they are still responsible within 30 days of their 18th birthday on either side to register for the draft. Why is that important? Because it could happen. And if it did, these are the steps that would take place pretty rapidly to reinstall and re-empower drafting young men into military service. If you have a son, a grandson, a nephew, a husband who's under 40 years old, they could fall subject to this. Now, I'm not trying to scare you. I want to inform you. So the first step that would happen is that we'd have to be in a crisis, pretty bad, so bad enough that the President of the United States would say, ladies and gentlemen, our nation is in mortal danger. And I, whoever his name or her name will be at the time, feel it necessary to reinstitute the draft so that we can defend our nation. That's the first step. The second step is that all of the men who have reached their 18th birthday and not exceeded their 40th birthday, their birth dates, 365, will be put in a big bottle, or they'll do it electronically. Everybody's birth date, 365 days, and they spin the wheel. Number 1 comes up, or whatever number comes up first, boom, the men born on that birthday will get draft notices. And then the next one, and the next one, and the next one, until they get enough to beef up the forces. The third step is that the selective service system is activated in that lottery process. And then they send the letters, and then folk are supposed to show up and go here or go there, Fort Knox, Fort Campbell, Great Lakes, or wherever, and they'll beef up those circumstances in order to greet those men and train them to go. Step 4, the physical and medical and emotional evaluations of the candidates take place. That's when you get there. And they look at you, and if you have flat feet or you got asthma or something like that, they tell you to go home. Others don't get to go home. And after that, you have the appeal boards. So if someone is, you don't have flat feet and you're in fairly good health and you can run a mile, then you might have a chance of going to your local draft board. And this is where I really want to get to. The church's responsibility in the local community to provide for and protect the young people of our congregations. So I'll come back to number 5 in a minute. But there are draft boards in every community. We don't know that because nobody talks about it. And because nobody talks about it, most of us don't know about it. So the people who are going to be running these draft boards are mostly going to be people who don't look like your sons. And you know what that means? They will be more likely to defer someone who looks like them than one of us. And I don't want to sound like a racist, but let's be real here. And then, so the next one is the first draftees are inducted. Now, how long do you think this might take? From step 1 to step 6, 30 days. 30 days. This is in statute. So these bases, they closed a lot of them. But the capacity for the existing places where they train people, they're going to be open forever. So, and if they need more space, they can always commandeer more space. Next slide, please. So here's what you can do. Every one of us here, I'm looking at us, and it looks like everybody sitting down here is over 18. So you can vote. This is important. As churches, our responsibility in the community is to make a difference, to be present, visible, and relevant. And this church has done a good job of that. The churches here in New York are great examples of relevant, competent urban ministry. But this area is an area that we tend to shy away from. Adventists generally don't get more than ankle deep in politics. It's time for Hanson Place, time for whatever church is a mile away or 2 miles away or 3 miles away to start looking at all of the municipal jobs and say, it'd be a good idea if we had an Adventist on the school board. It'd be a great idea if there was an Adventist on the city council, if there aren't already. Now, I understand Hakeem Jeffries has been to this church a number of times, several times. So he knows Adventist. He has been to Capitol Hill Church in Washington, D.C. several times already. And he's a powerful man. He has a good perspective on Adventists. The governor of the state of Maryland went to the Tacoma Park Church recently to thank them for something that their church did for his family 40 years ago. It was beautiful. We need to be influential in the courts of consideration and in politics, even now. And it might not come to fruition in other people's lives for 40 years. But good deeds done today are multiplied as they go by. Nothing's wasted. The last line there is inquire about your local draft boards. They still exist. Inquire. Look into it. Next slide, please. Because if it ever happened, if there's nobody brown and there's nobody Adventist, our folk will go in. Now, we can stand firm like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and God will be with us in the flame. But it helps to have somebody like Daniel who can speak to the king and turn that whole thing around simply because of influence. Next slide. This next slide is going to share with you a little bit about how to make inquiries about here. So, Selective Service wants to hear from the people in the community because they need to fill those boards. Here's the interesting thing about it, though. The boards are determined by the governors of the state and legislators who recommend names to them. I think if it's not each precinct, it might be a little larger than that, has a draft board. So that's a lot of people, a lot of opportunity to be influential, and your age doesn't really matter. But here's the thing. So I put there on the last one, if a military draft becomes necessary, there are approximately 2,000 local boards throughout the United States. These are the people who decide which young men in each community will get deferments, postponements, or exemptions from military service. That's where it's decided. We can get on our knees and pray, oh Lord, don't let Johnny go, but Lester might get called. And we ought to pray for Lester while he's gone. And so this is important. There's the other thing I wanted to say about this. People who get on these draft boards, next slide, it must be on the next slide, they serve 20-year terms. 20-year terms. And on the next slide, I think it says that the last time that the boards were filled en masse was 2020. We missed a window. When I was at ACM, I was making this presentation everywhere saying, folk, get on those draft boards. But here's the thing. Most of the people who are on them get on them when they're in their 50s or 60s. So they're not going to be there for 20 years. And there will be vacancies. Folk will get bored. Folk will get, I don't want to do that anymore because it's not paying a lot of money. I think you get paid per diem. Could you move to the next slide for me, please? There it is. And so there will be openings because people will die, get tired, or move, or things like that. So what do you have to be a board member? This is important. I think 99% of the people in the room could be on this board, 18 years or older. You must be a citizen of the United States. If you're a man, you must have registered for Selective Service unless you were born in 1957 until 1959. That means you aged out. You must not be a member of law enforcement occupation as defined by Selective Service policy. So can't be a prison guard or a police officer or things like that. You must not, and this excludes me, as much of this as I know, I can't do this job. because I was a career member of the armed forces and retired. And I'm not a criminal. Otherwise, I could do the job. But since I can't, Pastor, you could. Deborah, you could. Any of you could get on one or more of these boards. And imagine if they are precincts. And where we live, your precinct might be next to somebody else in this church's precinct. And because you have this knowledge now, and you call the number or go to the website I'm going to give you on the next slide, please, so they're, by now, that age, they've timed out of service. So there's the thing, local boards for 20 years, 2000s, vacancies occur. Next slide, please. Here's the application. Take a picture of this slide. When you go home tonight, if this has inspired you at all, log on to your phone, your computer, www.selectiveservicesystem.gov, volunteer, /volunteers, /board member -program. You can find out about what I'm just telling you. And if your place has a vacancy, you might be able to be on it. Now, God willing, we won't have another big war for 20 years. But we know that in these times, it's going to be perilous times. There are going to be wars and rumors of wars. Things are going to happen. So if we're preveniently prepared and in place, we, like Daniel, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, like Joseph, can be influential at the government level. Everybody got that picture? Okay, next slide, please. So there are other ways to serve. Other than the military, there are other ways to serve. Anybody remember the Peace Corps? It still exists. It still exists. The Public Health Service, they call, I won't say that. It's like the Navy. They wear Navy-like uniforms. They look the same. They deploy to different places and sometimes work in tandem with military, but more times than not, they're working on the epidemiology of crisis all over the world. The VISTA program, Volunteers in Service to America, still works. And do you see the one at the top right? Adventist Disaster Response. We already have a mechanism. And there actually was a moment I was on the phone with the director of the Selective Service System for the United States government. He called me because they know that Seventh-day Adventists historically have a orientation toward non-combatancy, which doesn't exist. But in the event of a draft restored, they wanted to talk about what the Seventh-day Adventist Church had in place to be an alternative to the draft. This would be a good thing, but it's not all the way set up yet. This is a good thing. Some of you may remember the Medical Cadet Corps back in the old days. That was a very meaningful preparatory tool to take our children from pathfinding to a more informed and prepared medical support role if they got into the military. That has kind of faded away. Up in this conference, Greater New York, and some of the other conferences in the Atlantic Union and Southern, they still have it. The problem is we are working hard to get all of them to work with the Adventist Disaster Response Team in North American Division to get certified. It's not enough to be a Pathfinder. Next slide, please. So I'm going to recommend to your Pathfinder leader, whom I met today, who isn't in here right now, but I'm going to recommend to her, that's a good slide, but next one, please. There are FEMA courses, Federal Emergency Management Agency courses, that every master guide, in my opinion, should be taking. And with those certification courses, then our Pathfinders, working in tandem with the Adventist Disaster Relief Authority and some of the other emergency management teams, could be deployed in times of crisis. Still waiting on that next slide. There it is. So Civil Air Patrol, Peace Corps, community services. But you see those 4 things? These are free courses that are available via internet, that if every master guide took those 4 courses and the Adventist Community Services Emergency Response Training Course, Disaster Response Course, there you go, you'd get a card like this. And if something happened like a building collapsed, 9/11, or something smaller, where there is a need for chaplains or people who have strong backs, an army of young people prepared to go in to help and to bring the presence, the grace, and the love of God into a crisis. If you have this card, then you'll be in a system that upon official deployment from Derek Lee at the North American Division would afford you the opportunity to be involved in support. In these crisis situations, self-deployment is a nuisance. And if you show up in a military-like uniform, prepared to serve, but you don't have this, they're going to tell you to go away. And if you persist, see, in bad situations, and we've seen these things happen, I'm going to tell you why in just another few minutes, another couple of slides. If a situation is bad enough, a self-deploying asset becomes a threat to the mission. And if you argue, you get there and you want to work, but you don't have this, and you want to argue, you can be arrested on site. Now, here's the other rub. I don't want you to think I'm a racist, but you know as well as I do that here in New York, in Maryland and Washington, D.C., a lot of the folk in the Medical Cadet Corps are from other countries who may not have full citizenship, but want to be involved. To get arrested at a crisis center that is under the control of the Federal Emergency Management Agency is a federal violation. And they will run your fingerprints. They will run your background. And if you are not in it, they put you on buses and airplanes and send you away. This is not the time to argue about credentials. Now is the time to get them. So the Medical Cadet Corps, with people from other countries who may or may not have earned the citizenship here, if they have this, that solves the problem. It solves the problem. And It can assist in advancing or accelerating immigration waivers and citizenship. For someone who joins the military, who is 18 and isn't a full citizen but comes from a country that can join the military, their citizenship applications can be expedited 5 years. 5 years. I know this. I went with several of my sailors, and I stood there and watched them put their hands up and take their oath of citizenship because they invested some time in the military. This is a similar thing. Thank you very much. So these 4 courses, you've got them there. So your assignment after this tonight is to pray for the peace of America, the peace of Israel, because in its peace, we find peace. Pray for the peace of Taiwan, the peace of Sudan and Darfur. Pray for peace all over the world, even though we know that Satan is going to become so rabid and rampant that it's going to, we just know bad times are coming. But even in the midst of bad times, God's people can be at peace. Would you give me the next slide, please? God's people can be at peace. I can't hardly read that from back here, but that is another list of federal organizations that offer volunteer opportunities that may also be alternatives to a draft. You need to take a picture of this. And if you know a 17 to 40-year-old male who would rather not be drafted into military service suddenly, it would be a good idea to build relationships with these agencies. And we could go to the next slide, and here's a very important thing. My last job while I was on active duty in the Navy was with the Joint Forces Headquarters National Capital Region in Washington, D.C. What that organization did was work out contingency plans for cases where something might happen that would overwhelm the local police departments and security agencies' ability to respond. While doing that job, I discovered that every community, should be every, but certainly every community that is of some size and population has an O-Plan 3600. It might be a classified document in your community or just one that is not well published. You can go online and type in New York City O-Plan 3600 or Brooklyn or whatever. Type that in. What O-Plan stands for is Operational Plan for crisis circumstances that overwhelm local government. What can you do? How can you fix it? I know a lady out in Salt Lake City, Provo, Utah, and she's familiar with this. And their church, the Adventist Church in Provo, Utah, sits down the block, maybe about 1,000 feet from a fire station. Their church is a federally designated I'm sorry? No, it's not a poll site. Man, that word just went out of my brain. It's getting to be. But if something bad happens, for crisis management, it's an alternate site where people can come, and they've been provided with, they have a big gym and a fellowship hall. They've been provided with medical equipment such that they could actually set up a de facto emergency room in their church, and food kitchens and things like that. They have those, so the Salvation Army would come there and take things and just have a food kitchen on their parking lot. and all of that. These things are outlined in this old plan 3600 document. And there's the Pathfinder leader. Hey. Next slide, please. In addition to this old plan 3600, there are also continuity of government plans. It is a good idea for our folk to be aware of these things, because in a crisis, if we don't know what to do, or we haven't built relationships with people who are tasked to do great things, they'll say, well, who are you and what do you need? You'll have to get in line. But if you know the people, next slide, please. If you know the people who are running these operations, then you have clout and influence. So there you go. Continuity of government operational levels. This is on the internet. Talking about it in too much depth does become classified, and I haven't been out long enough to openly share stuff that I absolutely know. But this is important. If we got into a really bad situation, things can change. Your freedoms. Remember 9/11? How many of you were able to get on the internet? I was sitting at home in the suburbs of Maryland, and Deborah called me and she said, turn the TV on, turn the TV on. A plane just flew into the towers. And I was like, it must be one of those private planes, because that had happened before. And I saw what happened. I was like, in America? What? And then when the second plane hit, I'm like, this is really something. So I brought out my computer and I tried to get online. Couldn't. How many of your cell phones worked that day? Mm-hmm. Why in the world could that be? They only knocked down the tower. What happened to all the cell phone towers? What happened to all the internet connections all over the country? They were shut down by the government. Remember what happened in Israel just 3 weeks ago? They shut the internet down, just like that. And so when those things happen, we need to be prepared. So please learn these levels. Con 4, life is good, no threats. We're all right. God's blessing. We can do everything we want to. 3 says, there's some things happening and Americans ought to be on guard. And the people who need to be around for emergency management situations need to be aware, get your uniforms together, pack your stuff, because anything could happen. There's the first responder. Does any of this sound familiar to you? Yeah, so COGCON 2 means, something bad's about to happen, or has. And how do we respond to it? 1 says it was really, really bad. And 0, America, if you get there, America as it has been won't exist again. And it will require some tremendous shifting of resources and all to retain a level of security. And here's the other thing you need to know. Shocked me when I read it. Thought, in America? This can't be. You read that lower paragraph a little closer. That last line says something about conscription plan to fulfill any labor required for the purpose of, what's that word? National defense, and what's the last word? Reconstitution. You know what that means? Oh, this is not fight so much now. This is if they send out trucks looking for able-bodied people because we need people to work. And refusal to go can be met with execution on site. in America. This exists. This could happen. So if we got to COGCON 0, something really, 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 really bad has happened. Buildings have fallen, governments toppled, and we need people to restructure society. We need workers, people who can do stuff. And literally, the military that's still in existence would have the authority, based on the president's signature up there, which should have happened on January 6th, that didn't, because on January 6th, we should have been at least in 3, probably more likely 2. But so, I know that down at Quantico, the Marine Corps base just south of D.C., every day, there are 26 helicopters that sit on a runway, fueled and ready to roll. So that if the Capitol was attacked, they come up the Potomac River, they land at Fort McNair, some of them go right over to the Capitol, and whoever's not supposed to be there probably won't go home that night. And they try to extract the principal leaders of government from the Capitol building. The White House is a whole nother thing, and they get the president to Andrews Air Force Base. He's on Air Force One and gone. That should have happened January 6th. It didn't. The helicopters never came from Quantico. Every day at an Army base in North Carolina, there are 3 transport jets that are waiting. They're fueled up and they're ready to go. They can turn them on, and in 10 minutes from the call, they can be out every day. There are 700 airborne rangers who sit in a gymnasium with full packs and armament, and they sit there, loaded guns, waiting for the call. And if the call comes, they run outside and they get on those jets, and in 43 minutes, those jets are over the Capitol, and those airborne rangers are parachuting out onto the Capitol grounds. And what happened on January 6th should not have ended the way it did. These are the kind, that's what this COGCON thing is about. Could it happen again? Absolutely could. What will we do if it does? What will we do if it does? Let's talk about church. So my job in Joint Forces Headquarters National Capital Region as a chaplain was to be the assistant to the chaplain for the Military District Washington. If a situation became so bad that, like COVID, we had to shut things down, and they wanted churches to shut down, and they did, they shut down churches and left liquor stores open. Amazing how that happens. But that was a reality and could have been a test run for how things would happen in the future. So once this happens and churches, houses of worship are shut down, particularly if it becomes a thing where it's internecine, churches against churches, synagogues and mosques or that kind of thing. So the churches are shut down for community stability. If it got that bad, here in this area, the military district for this area would then reach out to some of the religious leaders in the community to say, we need your help reestablishing spiritual services, but we can't have every church open. So if the pastor for Hanson Place doesn't know about this or doesn't know the people who are making the decisions, I was that decider for the Washington, D.C. area for 2 years. If it had happened, what churches were going to open, would have been on my desk. I know which ones we would have opened pretty quickly. None of them was ours. Not one. Not Capitol Hill, not First Church, not even Sligo made the list. So, and I said to the pastors back then, maybe if we do some things and so I'm saying to you all, take this information, sift through it. If any piece of it gets traction in your spirit as we move into, anybody remember the book Preparation for the Final Crisis? This is what I'm talking about. This is the real deal. We've had plenty of time to get our faith strong. Now it's time to start building influential infrastructure in the community for our people. Our boys and men, 17 to 40, they need our cover, our prayer cover, our influence in the draft boards, in the alternate service organizations. And we need to be aware of these things so that we can position our church buildings to be utilized appropriately and train our church members how to be responsibly responsive in the midst of a crisis. I got one more slide, I think, and that's prayer, God's prescription for the world going forward. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, unto all that are carried away captives, whom I have caused to be carried away from Jerusalem to Babylon, build houses and dwell in them, plant gardens and eat the fruit of them. Take wives and beget sons and daughters, build families and take wives for your sons and give your daughters husbands, that they may bear sons and daughters, and build community, that ye may be increased and not diminished. And seek the peace of the city whither I have caused you to be carried away captives, and pray unto the Lord for it, for in the peace thereof shall ye have peace. Pray for your leaders. I understand your mayor had a conversation with the FBI last night, and they took his cell phone and his iPad and all because people are saying, because he's been kind of effective, that his fundraising was inappropriate. They're trying to cut him off at the knees. He may have some culpability. I don't know. I'm not in that. But pray for the peace of New York City and all the boroughs and the state and the peace of America, Taiwan, Israel, Australia, everywhere. Just pray that God's peace will reign. Will you do that? Do you have any questions for me? Yes, ma'am. What do you want? I'm a grumpy old veteran. No, I don't have one of those. I don't know, because I'm not from this area, but I would say build. Whatever you already have, build on it. Spread out. Think of your current network as Walden Pond, or, a lake, a still pond. And think of influence. If you drop a pebble into the pond and you get circles and circles and circles and circles, build concentricity in your current network so that the influence spreads and spreads and spreads. Any other questions? Say again. If you go onto the North American Division of Seventh-day Adventist website, I think they have a departmental tab for community services. If not, the phone number is 443-391-7200. I can give you that again. And ask for Derek Lee. He's the Director of Community Services. Yes.
This young lady asked a question right behind you. Is the director of ACA. She's turning her back. Her name is Sister Mari. Speak to her, and she can help you because she is the director for the upcoming year. She's associated right now. She will be able to help you to become a part of the ACS.
So everybody else can hear you. So by exempted, what do you mean? From work on Sabbath or? Yeah, so there are some exemptions that can happen, especially for people who are in seminary or in academic programs that are rare, those kinds of things. The religious exemption, I can tell you that if the draft is ever instituted again, there will be fewer and fewer of those. But inside the system, there is a very robust doctrine of religious accommodation. In fact, the rules say that a request for religious accommodation will be approved by the lowest level person as long as it doesn't interfere with good order and discipline. And if I'm Corporal Johnson, Seventh-day Adventist, and I want to go to church on Sabbath. I'm stationed somewhere, and there's a church down the street. I can put in a religious exemption to, with an alternative to not work on Sabbath if Sabbath work is an issue. The rule says my sergeant will approve that as long as it doesn't impede good order and discipline. If Sergeant Smuckatelli says, I ain't approving that because I don't believe in the Sabbath, okay, then he has to go to the master sergeant or the lieutenant. And if the lieutenant doesn't do it, then it goes to the colonel. If the colonel says, no, we're not doing that, you Seventh-day Adventist, it goes all the way to the Secretary of the Navy or the Army or Air Force. And the problem then isn't Corporal Johnson, it's Colonel so-and-so and Lieutenant so-and-so and Master Sergeant so. Why didn't you do it? And because you didn't, you're going to have a price to pay. But this guy gets to go to church. So that's where it stands these days. Exemption from being drafted, that's where the local draft board matters. And so that group in that place at that time may have had more influence on the local draft board than Corporal Johnson's vote. Did that answer? Well, thanks. Anybody else? I hope I didn't bore you to tears, but I did want to, this is important information. Yes, ma'am.
For me, I am a poll worker. I'm with ACS. I want to do more. I am also with emergency management.
Great.
The medical cadet sounds very interesting. I wish that was pushed a little bit more in the church. I think many young people would go there, because many of them could go from there into a medical career of some sort,
Mhm.
because they would have the experience. Um, what would you suggest for myself? I'm trying to figure out about the draft boards, how to get one, how to get on one.
Yeah, go to that www.sss.gov thing, and there will be information there. The Medical Cadet Corps foundationally is a great avenue of preparation for military service because of the close order drill and all of that. But it is also a good preparation for, like you said, nursing or med school down the road. My hope as it relates to crisis response is that the leaders of the Medical Cadet Corps in the unions where they are most viable, Atlantic Union, Southern Union, and Southwestern Union, that they would make that alliance with the Adventist Community Services, do the FEMA courses, get that certification, and that's solid gold in my mind.
Yeah, because emergency management is a thing now.
Oh, yeah. People getting doctoral degrees and all. But there are a lot of people who want to be chiefs. And there need to be some workers. And the Medical Cadet Corps would prepare people for that. And with the maturity that they have, because of their experience, it might qualify them for more responsibility. But thank you for your service. Anybody else? Well, I think that concludes the day. I hope you felt that this was informative and not time wasted. There's one more question. My wife has her finger up. I have to obey. Yes, dear. They have it upstairs. So the PowerPoint is on the computers up there. Your AV team has a copy of it, and feel free to, they can spread it like the leaves of autumn. Well, I think we ought to pray or something. The sun has set, so it might be a little late to sing Day is Dying in the West, but man, that is really such a bonding thing. Obviously, you know that I'm a soloist. I sing solo that most people can't hear me. But if someone could lead us, guide us in Day is Dying in the West, I'd be real thrilled about that.
I would just like to say before we do that, may I have the mic? There are those who are selfishly looking for things for themselves. And I remember some years ago, we went to the transportation department to get time off for one of our deacons. And he was given the time. We went to the head. And I was shocked that one day a call came asking, where is your deacon? And I said, I am no longer at that church. Asked for Pastor Brewer, who was the next minister, and he was not at the church. But they said every time overtime came up, that Adventist showed up and forgot he was an Adventist and always wanted double pay for the time off. He said, do you remember I said I wished everyone were Adventist, but Adventist of integrity that we could trust. That same man's wife was a bus driver in New York City, and they decided for each of us through your servants this afternoon. We just want to give you thanks. As a beautiful wife could speak of her husband as a man of integrity, a husband of love, a father and a grandfather. Thank you for the instructions we had, and as you continue to pour your lovely blessings on members of the Hanson Place Church and others that are watching via the streaming, may we say, I have tasted and I know that the Lord is good. Travel with the Andersons as they go. We pray that sleepiness will not come now, but as they talk to one another, they will hear the voices of their guardian angels. Continue to watch between us as we will separate from one another. Bring us back again at the next appointed hour. In the wonderful name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
So now, before we get on the road, I want to pray for those in this congregation who may have illness or pain, discomfort, heartbreak, vertigo, whatever. I am praying, dear God, that you would descend in this room and bring healing. And, you know, even if it is our appointed time to die, then our bodies will stop, but heal our souls in preparation for the kingdom so that we could die in peace. But for the other things that are in the flesh, Lord, I ask for relief in this very moment. I won't be around to hear the testimony, but if the broken heart is mended, if the vertigo is eliminated, if the other illnesses are seen to, then may they share their testimony of how God answered prayer. I saw how Oscar Lane prayed for a woman who couldn't hear, and then she was able to hear. Her ear doctor came the next day and said, what's going on here? I heard this, and somebody else came up with an issue. Give us the ability to heal, I pray, not through our might, but through yours and your strength. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.
Amen. I would love to have you both on my show. Could you give me your information?
What show?
Community Connection.
Here's a card with my phone number,
Okay,
and you can give us a call.
I will.
Thank you. Tell me your name again.
Colette, Boston.
Colette Boston. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. This was an honor.
I'm glad. Thank you for being here.
Yes. And recovering. Bye. Thanks.
Let me help you with your collar.
Thank you, sir.
Pastor, thank you. Thank you. What a blessing.